Today we are going to travel back in time that tested not only economies but also hearts. We often hear about the Great Economic Depression as a global economic disaster, but behind every chart, every number, and every possible line graph, there were people trying to keep faith in a system that seemed to be falling apart. And in Germany, that faith was placed in something young and fragile, the Weimar Republic. The story isn't just about unemployment and politics, it's about trust, how deeply people can believe in something, and what happens when that belief begins to crack. The first part in this video will contain the crash heard around the world when this happened. Picture this. The year is 1929. The world feels confident until suddenly Wall Street collapses. Banks shut down, savings vanish, and across the Atlantic, Germany, still recovering from its humiliating defeat from World War I, begins to unravel. By 1932, nearly 6 million Germans were out of work. 1 in every 3 people were unemployed. Unemployment rates had skyrocketed in Germany. Imagine that feeling, not just of hunger, but of uncertainty. Parents watching their children go to bed hungry, wondering what tomorrow would bring. That factories were closed, farmers couldn't sell crops, and families waited in long queues for bread. The hardest part wasn't only about losing money, it was about losing trust and faith. It was about losing stability. It was about losing the willpower, the belief that life could be normal again. And that trust had been placed in the young, newly formed democracy called the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic's fragile foundations is what I'm going to talk about in the second part of the video. The Weimar Republic began after World War I, a bold step into democracy, equality, and freedom, but it carried deep wounds right from birth. The Treaty of Versailles had blamed Germany for the war, demanded harsh reparations, and stripped away pride. Many people felt that the new government had accepted shame instead of standing strong. They even called its leaders the November criminals. And then there was Article 48, a rule that allowed the president to take control in an emergency. It was meant to be used as a safeguard, but it was used often enough to make people wonder if democracy could really stand on its own. The governments were falling, the democracy was falling, coalitions broke apart, leaders changed so fast that citizens couldn't even remember their names. So when the Great Economic Depression struck, it didn't just break the economy, it broke confidence that the Republic could protect its people when they needed it the most. Part 3 of this video, I would like to discuss about the emotional collapse. This is the harder part to talk about, I'll be honest, because it's about how pain changes people. The middle class, teachers, small business owners, families who had worked hard to save saw their security vanish overnight. Farmers watched food rot in the fields while people in the cities were hungry. Because of the Great Economic Depression, the system seemed cruelly upside down. And the young people who should have been planning their futures, yes, I'm talking about the students who should have been planning their futures at this time, saw nothing waiting for them. Nothing. No jobs, no direction, no hope. And Despair like that doesn't stay quiet. It grows, it changes how people think. And finally, when trust disappears, even rational, kind people begin to search for someone, anyone, who promises stability, dignity, and hope, which is why the Nazism rule had begun in the first place. Part 4 of this video has the rise of extremes. In that emptiness, new voices began to rise. Someone from the far left, promising equality and revolution. Others, like the National Socialists, promised pride and strength. Adolf Hitler's words were dangerous. To those who felt invisible, they sounded like reassurance. He said, I will give you jobs. I will make Germany proud again. I will fix what democracy couldn't. For a tired worker, that felt like hope. For a wounded veteran, it felt like justice. For the hungry child, it felt like safety. The safety, the kind of assurance that they were waiting for so many years, ever since the humiliating defeat in World War I. The Great Economic Depression didn't create extremism, but it made people ready to listen to it. Because when trust is gone, even the wrong answers could sound right. That is what is also applicable today. When someone's heartbroken, everything seems to be right to them, which is why it is important to be sensitive to these kind of people who are heartbroken and at that particular time. Now, what the coming for us today is that the most fragile thing in a democracy isn't about laws, it's about trust. If we look at the world and what the governments are, we can see that nearly every country wants to be a democracy, but it is essential for us to know which is a true democracy and which is a real democracy. If it has a communist rule, even though it is having elections, it is not a democracy. If it is using some dirty tricks, even while having elections, then it is not a democracy. If only one party or any other allied parties with the party are contesting in the elections, then it is not a democracy. If the election has been tampered with and the opposition have been harassed, then it is not a democracy. And most importantly, if the media is not free, if the freedom of media is not present, it is not a democracy, because democracy gives dignity to the people. The citizens don't choose their rulers, they are the rulers themselves, which is why we talk of democracy today. Nearly every country in the eastern and western worlds wants to be a democracy. It wants its people to have rights. Every person in this world wants freedom and rights. But to maintain a stable democracy, it is not dependent on laws but on trust, which is why I had the idea to make this video in the first place. Economic crises can shake nations, but losing trust in leaders, in systems, in each other, that's what truly endangers freedom. And that is what can make the roots of democracy fragile. We have to remember that when people feel unheard or hopeless, they stop believing the system is worth saving. And history shows us where that road leads. So the real message of the Great Economic Depression, or the Great Depression as it is called, isn't only about money or economy or charts or numbers or unemployment, blah blah blah. No, it's about protecting the invisible thread of belief that tomorrow can be better, that tomorrow we can trust each other to make this. and to maintain peace and democracy. Albert Einstein had used his scientific reputation as a genius scientist to work for diplomacy around the world because he felt guilty about the atomic bombs and the disaster that was caused in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 after his letter to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Sorry, it is Franklin D. Roosevelt. So when you hear the words, I would like to convey, when you hear the words Great Depression, think beyond the numbers. Think of the people, mothers, fathers, students, grandparents, children, babies, everyone who were trying to keep faith when everything felt uncertain. History teaches us empathy, not just facts. It teaches us that trust, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. Even Rahim Das, in his Dohe, as we call in Hindi, said, yeah, I'll say this in Hindi and then in English, okay, that मेरी जान, अगर एक बार ये प्रेम का धागा टूट जाए तो उसे वापस जोड़ने के लिए गांठ बांधनी पड़ती है. Meaning, once the thread of love is very fragile, once broken, we have to tie a knot to join it together, meaning it will not be the same. The trust, the love, the thread of love had been prepared with trust, understanding of each other and confidence, but when it all broke, the same amount of confidence cannot be joined back together. Let's keep studying history, not just to memorize pain, but to understand people and to make sure that we never repeat their heartbreak. Thank you for joining me today on Coffee with Amisha. This is your host, Amisha Bhanti, signing off. Take care, stay generous, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next episode.